Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. The cucurbit crops, your squash, pumpkin, your melons, and cucumbers are very popular for growing in Oklahoma. Even though they do vary in flavors and textures and uses, they all come from the same family and share many of the same pests and many of the same characteristics. Now, one of the things to keep in mind about your cucurbit crops is their method of flowering. They have both female flowers and male flowers. This is very important because you need to have pollen transferred from the male flowers to the female flowers by some sort of insect pollinator, generally honeybees, although other wild bees and flies can pollinate successfully. Now, the female flowers and the male flowers are very easy to tell apart. If you look at the base of a male flower, such as this one, there's no swelling, it's just the petal parts and the stem stalk. The female flowers, on the other hand, you'll see, this is a summer squash plant, crookneck summer squash, and you will see a miniature crookneck summer squash. If this is a watermelon plant, you would see a miniature watermelon plant. Cucumbers, you'd see would look like a very tiny cucumber. Now, this is going to be tomorrow's female flower. All of the flowers, either male or female, only last one day. They will open generally somewhere around sunrise. They're open and receptive through the morning and early afternoon. By mid to late afternoon and definitely into the evening, they will fold up, and if the female flower is not pollinated, it will go ahead and fall off. If it's pollinated, it will go ahead and develop into a fruit. The male flowers, that was their day in the sun. They will fall off whether there was pollination or not. Now, we'll look down here again. We can see yesterday's female flower that was pollinated and is now starting to swell. You can see the definite difference just in a couple of days, what that makes. And at the very end, you can see the remains of the blossom, of the flower part, that has gone ahead and fallen off. Now, by tomorrow, this will be a good-sized little summer squash plant and ready to eat. You really want to harvest these summer squash when they're quite young, just a few days old, so that they're still very tender, the seeds have not developed, the skin is not tough, and that's when they're at their best flavor and their best eating quality. If you do happen to let them go by, if you go away on the weekend vacation and come back and there are some squash that have gone by, pick those off. Any fruit that is on this plant and is allowed to develop seed will inhibit the pollination of other female flowers, and so you're going to cut your production of the small fruit, which is what you want. So any summer squash that go by, pick them off immediately. Now, one of the common complaints and questions that we get from especially first-time gardeners, they put in squash or watermelons or muskmelon, and the plant starts growing and they think they're doing just great, and they are, and they see all sorts of blossoms down there, and they start just getting real excited, and the blossoms all fall off, and they wonder if they're doing anything wrong, and most of the time they're not. On all of your vine crops, the first flowers to come out are usually male flowers, and they don't have any way of producing fruit, so after their one day in the sun, they will just fall off, and that's what they're seeing. They're seeing that first flush of all male flowers, which automatically fall off, and then as the season progresses, the female flowers will be produced and will be formed, and you will start getting fruit. But those first flowers, you generally don't get anything off of. Don't get excited if they all fall off without any fruit set. On watermelons, the main runners that come out generally only produce male flowers. It's the side branches as they come out, that's where you will find generally your female fruit, which will turn into your watermelons, your fruit that you're going to be eating. Now, as long as the tip of the vine is still growing, that inhibits the growth of these laterals. As we get back farther, you can see it's getting far enough away from the influence of that growing tip that our laterals are starting to come out. And now we should be able to get some female flowers pretty soon. To start getting some earlier fruit, you can cut off the growing tip of these main runners. That will remove that growing tip and then allow these laterals to come out. This will help you get more production earlier, at least a little bit earlier, than you would otherwise. And that little bit of growing tip removed won't affect your yields appreciably. Now, just to show one of these female flowers, this happens to be a zucchini. We're at midday and you already see that it has bloomed this morning and it's already starting to fade. If we cut open our flower, you'll see inside that this is definitely just a very small, very immature zucchini. There are what will eventually grow into being the seeds all up and down the center of the base of this flower. Our zucchini plant here has 6 flowers on it. Only one of them, this one, was a female flower. So keep in mind, whenever you're looking at these plants, you see a lot of flowers, but you have to look behind the yellow petals to really see how many fruit you can actually get from that plant. There are at least 2 major insect pests on all of your cucurbit crops that you need to start looking out for now and control them now while they're either young or at low population levels. And that's your squash bug and your cucumber beetle. Your cucumber beetle, you have striped cucumber beetle and spotted cucumber beetle. They are different species, but they both have basically the same life cycle, cause the same type of damage, and we generally lump them together just as cucumber beetles. Squash bug, the overwintering adults are mating now, and they're getting ready to lay their eggs, which will hatch into the young nymphs. The adult large beetles squash bugs are very hard to control. Even very toxic insecticides will not give good control of the adults. To get good control of squash bugs and keep them down in population numbers, you need to either handpick those egg masses or spray to kill those very young nymphs. When the squash bugs are small, they are susceptible to several insecticides. Thiodane and Sevin are the 2 that are generally recommended for homeowners. If you can get them while they're small, you can get good control. Cucumber beetles, again, you want to get them while their populations are low. Cucumber beetles are important not only from the direct damage they do, but because they also transmit the bacteria that causes bacterial wilt. So you need to keep the cucumber beetles under control, both to control their damage and to control the disease that they can spread. For cucumber beetle, it's generally Sevin, methoxychlor, or rotenone will control the cucumber beetles without any problem. And these 2 insects are problems on your squashes, pumpkins, your cantaloupes and watermelons, and also cucumbers. Even though the squash bug's called the squash bug, it will damage many other different kinds of cucurbit crops. The foliar diseases that you'll be looking out for mostly are anthracnose, downy mildew, and powdery mildew. If you start seeing spots or other signs of disease on the leaves, that is when you need to identify the problem either from a book or something that you know of, or take it into your county office and have them identify it for you. It's important to know this because the different fungicides that control the different diseases are different. No one fungicide will cover all of the different fungal diseases, so you need to identify it first. The best idea is to wait until you start seeing the first symptoms, then go on a regular spray program to control it. Now, one of those diseases, the powdery mildew, It's not really a spot as many of these other. It looks like a bit of talcum or some white powder on the leaves. Now be careful on your zucchini plant. The zucchinis just naturally will have a shiny, silvery white spotting on the leaves. And that is natural. That is not a disease. On the zucchini plant, this is not an indication of disease. Fungicide spray won't hurt it, won't help it because it's not hurting the plant. You're looking for powdery mildew, you're looking for a powdery white growth on the leaves, not a shiny white or shiny silvery spots on the leaves. Now last year, here at Oklahoma Gardening, we had problems with fruit rots on our watermelons and on our cantaloupes. Where the melon was in contact with the soil, we had terrible problems with rot getting in from the bottom and then infecting the entire melon. The best way to get around that and prevent that type of damage is to prevent contact of the fruit with the ground. Now, that can be done several different ways. You can use some sort of straw or hay and make a little nest underneath each melon and have the melon, as it's developing, just develop right on top of that mat. This way you've got good water drainage that goes down through the straw. You're preventing contact with the ground, so you're preventing infection of the melon by keeping it away from that ground contact. This works very well. Other methods that you can use, instead of straw, use a piece of board to put it on, or you can use the styrofoam bottoms for meat trays from the supermarket. Turn them upside down so they don't collect water. But really anything that will prevent soil to fruit contact will go a long ways towards preventing this fruit rot. I mentioned before how important pollinating insects are to your cucurbit crops, like these cucumbers and the squash and melons we were just at. It's hard to stress exactly how important they are. Each female flower will need to be visited by at least 8 or 10 bees or one bee 8 or 10 times in order to get fully pollinated and develop normally. If you notice, remember, when you look inside a cucumber or a melon, there are a lot of seeds inside there. Each seed needs a pollen grain to fertilize it. So you need to have good bee activity during this very short period of time that female flower is open and receptive. Now, if it doesn't become fully pollinated, the fruit either won't develop and it will fall off, or you'll get partially fertilized fruit which will develop into misshapen fruit, which will bulge in one part and then be skinny in the middle and then bulge out again, or some other combination of weird shapes. Pick these misshapen fruits off as soon as you see them so they won't interfere with pollination and development of further female flowers, which would make a fully formed and well-formed fruit. Now, anything that interferes with bee or insect activity, such as cold, rainy weather or very high wind conditions, that will interfere with pollination, and that can cause a sudden surge of misshapen fruit if we have very poor pollinating weather. Because these insects are so important, it definitely behooves you not to spray them with insecticide. If you need to get on a spray for cucumber beetle or for squash bug, remember these cucurbit flowers only last one day. They open in the morning, and generally by late afternoon they have started to close or are completely closed. So if you put on an insecticide spray, make it in late afternoon or in the evening when flowers are closed and bee activity is basically minimal or none. By doing this, you can basically avoid any interference with your pollinating insects. You can coexist with insecticide sprays and your bees. Now, your winter squash and pumpkins, they're best if they're grown as a fall crop. If you can get them to develop towards the cooler weather, they'll have better storage condition and basically better quality. If you are looking for squash, especially squash for storage in the winter, you really want to hold off planting on them until mid or late July. But if you're growing pumpkins and you want them for Halloween, you need to get them in by mid or late June in order to have them about 1 month before frost in October when you need them for decorations. We're going to put in some large fruited pumpkin. This is an old standard Big Macs. You want to plant them in hills about 3 to 5 feet between them and in rows 8 to 10 feet apart. Plant them about 1 inch deep. Make sure you water them in. And one thing about these later planted squash and pumpkin, your cucumber beetle and your squash bug are already active and already increasing in population numbers. The young seedlings of squash, pumpkin, or melons, if you plant them late, are very susceptible to damage from these insects. So watch them very carefully for signs of infestation, because those small seedlings are very prone to being killed, eaten right to the ground by these insects. And of course, you've got your same problems with diseases that you'll need to watch out for later. When the diseases occur, you'll need to go in with, identify the fungus and go in with a regular fungicide spray to control it.